Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to this Planning Committee meeting being held on Wednesday, the 13th of May 2026. This is a multi-locational meeting which is being held in the Council Chamber at Penalta House and via Microsoft Teams. This meeting is being live streamed and a recording will be made available to view via the Council's website, except for discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images and audio of those individuals present and or speaking at Planning Committee will be publicly available to all by the recording on the Council's website. Please can I remind all members joining remotely to leave their cameras on during the meeting and to use the hands up function on Teams when you wish to speak. For those members joining in the chamber, please also use the hands up function on Teams and turn on the chamber microphone when you wish to speak. Votes for this meeting will be taken via Microsoft Forms. When a vote is required, the form will appear on your screen and then members will be asked to click on yes, no or abstain and then click on submit vote. Please can I remind members that if you lose connection during the meeting, please make every effort to reconnect. However, the meeting will continue as long as it remains quorate. We now move to agenda item 1, to receive apologies for absence. I received apologies from Councillor Julian Simmons. Are there any others? None? No notification of any others? Okay, thank you. Then agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. Councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and or prejudicial interest in respect of any items of business on this agenda in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. Are there any declarations? No indication? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to agenda item 3, which is minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 8th of April 2026, which is pages 1 to 5 of the pack. I'll go through them one page at a time for accuracy. That's page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, and page 5. Okay, no indication of any issues with those minutes. So can somebody move then, please? It's been moved, thank you, and seconded. Can we have a vote then, please?
Yep, certainly, Chairman. Members, first vote today. Someone got there. There we are. It's gone.
Let's switch. Try that.
No, someone's got their microphone on here. Shall I have another go? Is that okay now? Yeah, there we are. So someone had their microphone on, but it's gone now. So members, there's going to be a poll before you any moment. Could you please vote on the accuracy of the minutes? Anybody having any trouble, please let me know and I'll record your vote. Okay, Chair, the minutes are carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we move on to agenda item 4, which is application number 26/0102, and it's a change of use, and it's at 25 Upper High Street, Rumney, Tredegar, NP12 5BS, and the case officer is Joshua Burrows. Joshua, can you make the presentation on this one, please?
Yep, thank you, Chair. I'll just share the screen now. Good evening, members. The application is located at 25 Upper High Street in Rumney. The application is for the change of use of a C3 dwelling to a C4 house in multiple occupation, a HMO. On screen is a site plan with the host dwelling outlined in red. On screen is a photograph of the host dwelling. It's the one in the centre. It's a mid-terrace 2-storey dwelling. On screen are existing floor plans. The property is accessed at ground floor, which contains a hallway, a lounge, a dining room, a kitchen and a bathroom, and the first floor contains 3 bedrooms. On screen is the proposed floor plan. The proposal will increase the number of bedrooms within the dwelling to 4. The ground floor layout would be reconfigured to provide 1 bedroom, a lounge, bathroom and kitchen, and the first floor would remain as 3 bedrooms. On screen is a proposed block plan. This would include a cycle store capable of storing 4 bikes. With regard to parking, it's not considered that the proposed development would have an impact over and above the existing use of the dwelling in terms of its parking requirement. The proposal is also not considered to have an adverse impact on neighbouring properties. The building is existing, so there are no overbearing issues. The upper floor rooms remain as bedrooms, and as such, there are no new privacy impacts. With regard to the C4 HMO use, it's not considered that the number of HMOs in the Toyincarno ward are at a point where the character of the area is at risk. Based on the number of known HMOs in the ward, HMOs count for 0.18% of residential properties. As such, the local plan authority is not in a position to argue that there is a high concentration of HMOs in the immediate vicinity or within Caerphilly County Borough as a whole. As such, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. And now we move on to the speakers. We have 3 speakers, starting with the local resident, Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams, you're entitled to 5 minutes, and I'll stop you when you get near the end, okay? Or advise you when you're near the end to wind up. You can start whenever you wish, just put your microphone on, okay?
First of all, I'd like to thank the committee for letting me voice my objections to the application. My first objection is regarding antisocial behaviour and the fear of crime. There have been at least 3 acts of antisocial behaviour and vandalism on the property due to the application. These acts involved the breaking of windows at the front and rear of the property, and on one occasion a person broke into the property to carry out criminal damage, which was most disturbing to the neighbours. There have also been incidents where people have banged the windows, kicked the door, shouting, "We will burn it down." This has led to many sleepless nights over the last months, where we live in fear of what happens next. All these acts have involved the local police force, where officers have attended the property. They also informed the community that they will increase the police presence in the area. All this has been caused by the application. These incidents were reported by email on the 13th of April to both the planning and private sector housing departments. None of these incidents are reported on page 8 of the planning agenda, though. Although under Section 17 of the Crime and Disturbance Act 1998, which imposes a statutory duty on the local authority and partners to consider the likely crime and disorder implications, including antisocial behaviour, in all discussions. This is a legal duty to prevent crime, so why was it not listed as a consideration before bat boxes and cycle storage? My fear is that there will be a serious escalation of antisocial behaviour against the property and its residents if planning is approved. It will not stop. My second objection is regarding noise and disturbance and impact on the character of the street. This proposal will increase the level of transient occupancy, resulting in more comings and goings and late night activity, producing an increased level of disturbance to elderly neighbours. Residents already have to put up with a constant daily disturbance from the 2 takeaway establishments and a busy corner shop in the street until late at night. There are now only 4 private dwellings in Upper High Street. All the rest are rented accommodation, with 1 already housing homeless people through a local charity. My third objection is fire risk. It's proven that there's a significant higher fire risk in HMOs compared to single household dwellings. More residents, often unrelated, means a higher likelihood of smoking or unsafe cooking practices, with shared kitchens being a high-risk area. This will also have a negative impact on insurance premiums and properties adjacent to the application. My fourth objection is regarding waste management and servicing. Increased waste from the property will possibly add to the current waste management issues on the street, which have been reported to the local authority on numerous occasions. All waste must be carried through the property as there is no rear entrance. Because of this, there's a danger of bins, plastic bags and household rubbish being left on the pavement at the front of the property, causing an obstruction and danger to the public under Section 46 Environmental Act 1990. There could be an increase of smell and rodent activity already present in the locality due to the fast food establishments if there is no strict waste management. Fifth objection is the lack of transparency regarding who or how many residents will be housed. There have been no assurances from the owner regarding what type of people will be residing at the property. He even said that it would not be used as a HMO due to the level of protest from the community. My sixth and last objection is parking. Parking on the street is a major issue. Residents have to compete with customers and delivery drivers of the two food takeaway establishments and the customers of a busy corner shop, often resulting in vehicles double parking, causing a traffic obstruction. Alternative parking is not available at the rear due to commercial vehicles being constantly parked there and a requirement for garage access. To sum up, I urge the committee not to ignore and take into account the large number of 300 plus objections from the community and to respect their strong feelings and reject the application. Planning should also be about people, not just property and profit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Okay. And now we move on then to Councillor Carl Cuss. You have 5 minutes as well, Councillor Cuss. You start whenever you wish.
Okay, thanks, Chair, members of the committee. Obviously, I'm speaking to object against the planning application at 25 Upper High Street, and I do so on behalf of residents who feel unheard, overlooked, and increasingly frustrated. My first and most serious concern is the lack of transparency from the applicant. Despite repeated engagement and significant back and forth, the applicant has been unable or unwilling to clearly state who they intend to house at the property. There have been vague references to possibly working with a housing association, but no names, no confirmations, and no accountability. This is simply not good enough. Residents who live next door, above and across the street have a right to understand what is being proposed in their community. This absence of clarity is not just an oversight, it demonstrates an attitude that disregards the people who already live there. Planning decisions must be built on openness and trust, and that trust is missing here. Closely linked to this is the absence of any meaningful detail about how the scheme would operate. There is no information about potential tenants, no management plan, no explanation of how issues such as waste, parking, noise, antisocial behaviour would be controlled. Without these assurances, there's absolutely nothing to convince residents or this committee that increased occupancy will not make existing problems worse. This area has already experienced significant antisocial behaviour concerns. This property has boarded up windows that blight the street. Residents have raised fears about safety and disorder. I personally referred these concerns to the planning officers and the local police, yet I do not believe these issues have been adequately reflected or seriously assessed in the officer's report. That is deeply worrying, especially when we consider that planning authorities in Wales have a legal duty, as been mentioned, under the Section 17 of the Crime and Disorder Act 1998 to actively consider crime and disorder and community safety when exercising their function. I therefore ask directly what analysis has actually been undertaken to meet that duty, given the clear warnings raised by residents and me as the local councillor. Parking is another critical issue, and we've seen the bike drawings, but it simply has not been dealt with robustly. Parking pressures on Upper High Street is already severe, as been described, particularly with nearby shops and a bus stop. Both front and rear access points are regularly congested. Yet the officer's report does not, in my view, adequately assess how additional residents will realistically park or how this proposal will avoid making an already difficult situation worse. Beyond this individual application, I want the committee to consider the wider pattern that this proposal represents. I was presented with a table of over 40 HMOs in the borough. 7 are in Rumney. That means 17.5% of the borough's HMOs are concentrated in one community. That should immediately raise alarm bells. Communities like Rumney are increasingly being targeted because property prices are lower than in the south of the borough. This is not organic growth, it is exploitation. We cannot allow certain areas to carry out disproportionate burden simply because housing is cheaper there. It is deeply concerning that there is no statutory planning guidance or policy within the council to manage or limit this concentration. When I raised this recently with Welsh Government officials, they were shocked that no such guidance exists. Policy should be preventative, not reactive. It should be in place before communities reach saturation point, not after the damage is done. Finally, residents have spoken clearly through petitions, objections and consultation responses. They have made their opposition known. They demand fairness, safety and respect. Those concerns deserve more than a curious acknowledgement. For all these reasons, the lack of transparency, the absence of management detail, the failure to properly address antisocial behaviour and parking, and the broader issue of over-concentration, I urge this committee to defer this application and request that it's brought back with clear reasons for refusal, or at the very least with substantially more detail and proper assessment. Rumney deserves the same level of protection, scrutiny and respect as any other community in this borough. I urge you to object. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cuss. We now move on then to the agent, Mr. Paul Parsons. Are you there, Mr. Parsons?
Yes, can you hear me?
You have 5 minutes as well, the same as the objectors. You start whenever you wish, okay?
Yeah. I'd just like to thank the planning officer for doing a thorough job. We have to act here according to the law. It is illegal to discriminate against any particular type of tenant or any that may possibly occupy a property. That is illegal. It is against the law to do so. People need housing and suitable housing, and this is a suitable property in a suitable area. It's a larger than average terrace house and can easily accommodate 4 people. My client has a business model where they purchase property and they lease them. They do not manage them themselves. They lease them to a not-for-profit housing association who will manage the tenants and they will manage the property. This is standard throughout everywhere. And obviously until we get planning permission, then we can't actually know which housing association will actually run the property. The fact that there's crime, there's crime and the property is empty. So there isn't. So when the property is empty, properties attract crime. So the crime in the area should, or due to the property, should cease once it is occupied and renovated. There's no saturation of HMOs in the area. As the planning officer, that's just fear. And these are people who need properties, who need to be managed. They are people who can't afford a property and will be housed by the housing associations who will come off council waiting lists. And they are people, they're not scum. I hate the way that planning committees talk about potential people as though they're scum and vermin. They're not. They're people who need housing. And the cost of living means that people can't afford a whole flat. They can't afford a whole property. They can't get a whole property. They will have to be managed in an HMO by a not-for-profit organisation. I think the planning officer has done a good job. We need to stick to the law, and there's no reason why this should not be approved. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Parsons. Can I just remind both the objectors and the agent that you cannot take any further part in the discussions. The discussions now is entirely within the members. So can you, first of all, officers, respond to some of the concerns raised by the objectors to the application?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Here we are again. This seems to be every month now that we discuss an application for a HMO. We discuss the same issues. I've listed them here. This is a new one actually. Antisocial behaviour to the existing property before the use actually commences. Well, we can't use that as a reason for refusing a planning application. It's not pertinent to the determination of any application at all. So then we've got Crime and Disorder Act, fire risk, impact on amenity, waste management, lack of transparency from applicant, and lack of car parking. In terms of those, the Crime and Disorder Act is specifically referred to in the report. Fire risk is not a planning issue. Lack of transparency from the applicant is not an issue. And then so in terms of impact on amenity and in terms of car parking, and I'm going to come on to this matter again when we discuss the next application as well. We have an application property here, which is currently a 3-bedroom property, which would quite comfortably accommodate 4 adults at this moment in time without any change of use to the property. We're looking at an application to change this into a 4-bed HMO, which would accommodate 4 people, with a maximum of 6 in there. Again, a terraced house could accommodate 6 adults anyway, without a change of use of that property. So from a planning perspective, when we are looking at land use planning here, so we can't consider who the tenants are going to be. So it's not a lack of transparency. We cannot consider that. So there's little point in the applicant providing the council with that information or providing us with a management plan of how they intend to deal with their future tenants, because they are not matters that we as a planning authority can control. So whilst that information could be provided as part of a planning application, we couldn't condition that they have to comply with that management plan. We cannot enforce that on the developers because it's not a planning matter. Other departments of the council do enforce those management plans, and I've spoken to our colleague in housing previously today, and they're aware of issues with HMOs in the area, but they manage those themselves. It's not a planning matter. We cannot manage those issues. So in terms of that changing from a 3-bed to a 4-bed, the same thing applies for car parking. So we could have 4 adults living in this property as it is at the moment. That would still require 4 parking spaces. There aren't any parking spaces with this property. So change it to a 4-bed HMO does not change the parking requirement for this property. So whilst it's been alleged that the report doesn't fully consider these matters, it has considered them, but it doesn't go into depth on them because there is nothing to consider effectively. There's no change from the status quo. We're not changing from anything which requires a significant increase in car parking. In fact, it doesn't require any additional car parking in this instance. Rumley is also a sustainable location which has got good access to a train service and a bus service. So people using this property, in accordance with national guidance now, would be expected to use public transport. So as a planning authority, I note the concerns of residents. There is no empirical evidence to prove that there will always be antisocial behaviour with a HMO. We've already had allegations that are antisocial behaviour with the property before it's a HMO. So changing the use of the property is not going to make any difference in respect of that. If there's antisocial behaviour afterwards, there's no change from what it is at the moment. And we have no control over that. That's a matter for the police to control. And I will raise the same issue on the next property as well, because that's an issue that's been raised in terms of the property in Annesley as well. So whilst I note the concerns of residents, I urge members and the residents to understand that as officers, and you as a planning committee have to consider the planning merits of this proposal. So all of the sort of emotion about fear of antisocial behaviour and fear of who's going to go into these premises is not a matter that you can consider today. Councillor Cuss has suggested we defer this application and come back with reasons for refusal. I could not, in all good conscience, come back to you in 4 weeks' time and give you reasons for refusal that I could defend at appeal. That's the only advice I can give to members. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Powell. We've got a number of indications from members for questions. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah. I see. Yes, I see one of the officers as well. I thought, looking at my screen, which is very small, I didn't see that we had another officer that wanted to respond. So, Kerry Davis, would you respond from the environmental health
Thanks,
point
Chair.
of view?
I think the resident raised some concerns regarding noise and pest control in particular. So I just wanted to say that I had looked at our service requests in regard to noise specifically from HMOs. So I looked at the full year for 2025. We'd had 5 complaints about noise regarding HMOs. So just for context, for all our domestic noise complaints for the same time period, total 603. So out of 603 domestic noise complaints Environmental Health had received, 5 of them were regarding HMOs. I think there were some concerns about overgrown gardens and rubbish as well. We'd had 3 complaints about overgrown gardens and rubbish about HMOs and 5 pest control calls associated with HMOs. So not huge numbers in terms of our general service requests relating to HMOs. I also spoke to our private sector housing team and they hadn't raised any significant requests in terms of HMO queries or complaints, just sort of standard compared to the normal complaints they receive about all private housing. There's no major increase specifically regarding HMOs. So I hope that helps for clarification. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. You wanted to come back in, Mr. Powell?
Yes, please, Chair. One of the issues Councillor Cuss raised, and I forgot to address it, was the absence of a policy in respect of HMOs within Caerphilly County Borough. We've discussed this at length, and I even mooted the suggestion of a policy in the forthcoming review of the LDP, just for discussion purposes. But when we give you figures in terms of the number of HMOs in the county borough, and I think Josh referred to the fact that 0.08% of the properties in the Rumney ward are HMOs. It will be similar figures across the whole of Caerphilly County Borough, if not slightly lower figures than those. There is national guidance, and we've referred to it before, and the national guidance says 10% is the point at which issues can start to occur. That's can occur, not will occur, can occur. So we're nowhere near 10% yet. If we want to put a policy in our LDP moving forward, and that's the only way we could bring a policy in, we can't bring one in the absence of a review to the LDP. We are looking at the review to the LDP. But even if we bring a policy in, we would have to convince an inspector appointed by the Welsh Government that there is a need for that policy in this county borough, that there is an issue with HMOs in the county borough. Notwithstanding the concerns raised by residents, there is no empirical evidence to substantiate that those complaints have any found in. So if we went to a local planning inquiry with a policy which says we will restrict the number of HMOs in the county borough, without any evidence to back that up, we would not be able to convince that inspector that we should have such a policy in our plan. So there's a reason why we don't have a current policy, because we can't bring one in the absence of a new LDP. And moving forward, it's unlikely we would have such a policy, because we cannot at this moment in time justify imposing such a policy, because there is no issue in planning terms in this county borough. There are, numerous authorities throughout Wales who have such policies. Cardiff will have one. Swansea has one. Ryan used to work in Swansea. I think RCT may have one because they've got issues in Rhydfelyn area. But they've got universities in those cities. They've got some streets where 100% of the properties in those streets are HMOs. That is where issues start arising. We are nowhere near that at this moment in time in this county borough. We would have significant difficulties in justifying imposing such a policy.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Powell. Now we've got 3 indications of speakers. First of all, Councillor Mansell Powell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've actually got quite a few questions on this one. I did spend quite a bit of time looking at the report, because obviously in Rumney there are, I think, separate issues to the rest of the Caerphilly borough. So would I be okay to go through all of the questions? I've broken them down where we can do them one or two at a time. but I do have multiple questions.
Whichever you think is best at this stage. If you're running into lots of questions and I see an indication from officers that they might want to come in a bit earlier, then so be it. But in the meantime, you just run your questions off.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Sarras. The consultation, first of all, it's not unlike any other, but we've got 110 letters of objections and 229 names, which doesn't differ to many other we've discussed it in these chambers in the past. It's worrying really when, and we have spoken of this before, we've got 110 letters and there's not a single item on those 110 letters that can impact the application going through. I have mentioned before about communication from the council to explain to residents and to people close these HMOs on the reason why they're going through planning. You know, the councils are having a lot of conflict in the awards. We're having a lot of, as a planning committee, you know, they're blaming us. I think it needs to be clearer to the public the reasons that these can't be stopped in a planning committee. And I've asked for this before, and I would urge the planning committee or the council to come up with some form of communication. That leads on to the 110 letters, and I'll get to the question shortly. A lot of those letters, a lot of those questions coming in are standard responses. And I do understand that, where the response to doctor surgery appointment, dentist appointments and the like are standard responses because they're not planning considerations. But yet, I am keen that this doesn't become a rubber stamping exercise where we are mirroring report after report with the same responses. You know, if we look at I'll get the question, page 11, the proposal complies with policy CW2 and would not have an unacceptable impact on the character of the local area of Blackwood. And that's in the report. Now, this application is for Rumney, so that's probably a typo. Okay, there was that. That stood out like a sore thumb.
I thought I changed that because I did not see it in the report.
Yeah, but you know, when we look at the people in Rumney, looking at these reports, we are looking at them. You know, we'd expect more, really. I did find the report lacked information. I did compare it with some other reports, and I thought it did lack some information that earlier reports, and that's what raised more questions. Right, we get into the questions. We go with parking first. On page 9, the analysis policy, the application has been considered in accordance with national planning policy and guidance. The main consideration of the determination of the applications are the compatibility and proposed use within a residential area and the impact on neighbour amenity and highway safety implications, which you did mention earlier. Page 11 says on LDP 5, car parking standards, states that 1 car parking space per bedroom should be provided up to a maximum of 3. This was confusing me, this statement. The site currently benefits from no off-road parking and is increasing the number of bedrooms from 3 to 4. As a result, no additional parking can be requested, and this does not have an adverse impact on the highway safety. So, in itself, when you're reading it, it's confusing. It's 1 minute is saying that they should have 3, and yet we've gone down, so we've got to stick with that. Now, the reason I got a question on this, if we look at 98 Queens Road, Elliotstown, Utradiga, the last one we actually put through planning, it states that 3 off-street parking spaces indicated on the approved plan shall be retained for the parking of vehicles. So this one had 3 spaces. The reason, in the interest of highway safety in accordance with policy CW3, the question I'm asking on this one, where's the interest in safety being met with this one in Rumney compared to the one in Utradiga, where there are no spaces? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so in many instances on terrace properties, there is no car parking or indeed any opportunity to provide car parking. And that is likely to be the scenario here. There's no opportunity for a rear access to provide car parking for this premise. So whether you're putting a domestic extension on the back of that property or whether you're changing the use to a HMO to create the extra bedroom, even though an extra car parking space in theory could be required, because there's no opportunity to provide it and there's a need to improve the housing stock, you strike a balance then between the need for the extra car parking space and the need to extend the property. And on a terrace property, you don't require it. Now, if it's a semi-detached property which has got a front garden where they can provide an extra car parking space, the likelihood is we would expect them to provide that extra car parking space because there is the capacity to do so within the site. On most terrace properties, there isn't that capacity to do so. Now, in Elliott Street in New Tredegar, they already had 3 parking spaces. They had enough car parking spaces to meet the need for that premises. So there wasn't a need to provide any extra car parking. On this one, it needs 3. It has none. So even though they provide an extra bedroom, because we're only allowed to require a maximum of 3 anyway, because the existing premises had no parking spaces, we can't ask an extra one because it's going from 3 to 4. So there's no need to provide an extra car parking space. Purely because it's a 3-bedroom property with no parking at the moment.
That's as clear as mud, I'm sorry, yeah.
Would you like to come in, Mr. Thomas? Yeah.
What we're looking at is the impact, the difference between the existing property and the proposed use.
Yeah.
The existing property would require 3 parking spaces. Proposed use would require 3 parking spaces. So the difference, in planning terms, there is no difference. In terms of the standards, the fact that it hasn't got any parking space, so the impact, because it should have 3 parking spaces, but it doesn't at the moment.
Yeah.
Therefore, that's already having whatever impact it's having. So change of use to another use. If that's got the same car parking requirement, we can't require any additional car parking, and that's applied across all sorts of uses. Where
The
we,
reason I
where
raised
we convert, for example, we might convert a community centre into a dwelling, but the community centre has a high parking demand. The dwelling has less in that circumstance. Or it might be the other way around. So even though the dwelling might require 3 parking spaces, it might not provide any because the community centre didn't provide any. You've got that fallback position. That's how we consider the applications in planning terms.
Okay. The reason I raised that question was obviously within the New Tredegar when it raised up the safety issue. Just to respond to that, off the Caerphilly County the planning web page, it says parking is a key material planning consideration. And plan officers assess whether the proposed conversion will lead to increased parking pressure and impact highway safety, particularly in heavy congested residential areas, which this one is. So I've got my doubts on that one. And that's off the actual planning website. And another statement that came on, which raises the next question, that came off the planning website, the site visit. We will assess the impact of the planning application. The impact of the application taken into account. So the question I wanted to ask, is the site visit actually taking place by planning, which is states on the website? And do we have the date of the site visit? Because there's no acknowledgement in the report. And this is taken off the planning Caerphilly County Borough website.
Yeah, my colleague will confirm the date of the site visit now, but one was certainly held, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it was just the acknowledgement. There was no acknowledgement in the report of a site visit within an heavily congested parking area and the concerns with the parking. We would have expected something highlighted in that visit within the report.
Yeah.
Again, I thought the report
sorry,
was weak.
Before Josh comes back and answers that question, the quote you just referred to then from the website says that the impact of car parking, I think it says there always was an increase in car parking as part of this development, or the impact of development on car parking.
It's parking as a key material planning consideration, Well, stated on the Caerphilly planning website, site visit, we will visit the site and assess the impact
the previous point about the car parking.
Yeah.
We consider the impact of the development on car parking, and as Ryan has just said, the impact of this development is the same as the existing use of the building. So whether we hold a site visit or not, there is no impact on highway safety because the requirement for car parking is exactly the same for both uses. So there is no impact on highway safety in respect to this development.
But I think what they're asking about, Carwyn, is the levels of congestion within that area. Not so much the parking highlighted to that property, it's a congestion around that area, and that would only be highlighted with a site visit.
But irrespective of whether it's congested in the area, there is no requirement for extra car parking, so there is no additional impact on highway safety. So even though it's congested already, it's congested with the existing use, and there's no change to the proposed use, so it's no more congested than the existing use.
Right, okay. a quick one with this one. I've got a question for you. An increase in the additional bedroom. Now, of the 4 bedrooms, I think 3 are double bedrooms, 1 is a single. Is there a condition that would be a maximum of 4 people? Because potentially that could be 7 people if the double rooms are doubled up.
A C4 HMO is for between 3 and 6 people. So if they were accommodating more than 6 people there, it would become a sui generis HMO, which require planning consent.
So that would be up to 6.
Yeah.
But that one would have an effect on the parking. Well, you know, we can go round on this one, yeah. But
Well,
there's no conditions that there would be a limit of 1 per bedroom.
No, but there's no limit on 1 per bedroom in an existing 4-bedroom house either, in which case you could have 8 vehicles at a domestic property.
Right, okay with that one. Sorry, Carwyn.
You've still got more?
2 more, Roy, sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Page 11, with regard to the potential concerns contained in the Welsh Government guidance and the concentration of HMOs. Not all HMOs require a licence. This is the one with the 10%. 2 secs. Just let me catch my thoughts a second on this one. Yeah. I read the report on this. It's not considered the proposed change of use itself would significantly change the immediate character of Rumney or detrimentally impact the current levels of amenity received. The report says not all HMOs have a licence, and in that respect is unknown how many HMOs there are in the Caerphilly County Borough Council. So that I take that to believe that we don't know how many is in Rumney. Looking at Rumney, the Twin Carno ward in itself, if you start from the bottom of the High Street only, and we're not talking about all of Rumney, we're talking the High Street only, we've got one next door to the police station, we've got one which was just an old type building, then we've got opposite, we've got the doctor's surgery, which I believe has got 10 or more, we've got the Royal, which is an enigma, we've got next door to the Royal, the old council offices further up the street, the Tabernacle, which is well managed, but again, you know, it's the residents there are some issues. We've got one on the High Street and one on the Upper High Street. Now, my question is, how can we make an assumption that this area is not flooded with HMOs when the planners or the council themselves don't know how many is there? Now, we're not talking about all of Caerphilly, the 0.18. We are talking about the High Street in Rumney, and that's my biggest concern with this.
As a planning authority, we can only work on those which have got planning consent. So we've got 3 properties which have got planning consent, and this would be the 4th within the High Street, Church Street, Upper High Street area. Okay, there are 208 properties along that run, so it's roughly 2% of those properties are HMOs in terms of those with planning consent. I'm not sure. I didn't think to count up the number that you give me there. But the number you give me there was probably including the doctor surgery, which was prior to the need for planning consent for HMOs. You're talking about 20 HMOs on the whole run, and that's in the Rumney area. So even then, you're slightly less than 10% of those 200 on High Street, Upper High Street and Church Street. And in the whole of Rumney, because the doctor surgery isn't actually on High Street, if you count the whole of Rumney, there's significantly more than 200 dwellings. So you're nowhere near 10% of the dwellings in Rumney.
My concern is with the Rumney one, Carwyn. Yeah, we're talking about the High Street. If we just look from the start to the last one on the High Street, are there too many HMOs there? When are we going to get the 10% if we don't know how many are unlicensed and are there already? And until we got that information, I'm finding it really difficult to agree with this going through. What I would suggest is, the question I was going to ask is, if Caerphilly Council doesn't know how many there actually are within this area, which is in the report, we believe there are more than what are in the report. We know that. Should this item be deferred until that information is available? So what I would say is, could a motion be put forward? I'm happy to put a motion forward and the committee take a vote on postponing the decision on this one until we get the information how many HMOs are actually licensed or not on that High Street.
Okay, you could certainly put that motion forward. I can't stop you doing that. It's within the gift of members to do so. even if there are, I mean, and in terms of the doctor's surgery, Councillor Custer just mentioned there are 7 HMOs in Rumney. And that's the whole of Rumney. The doctor's surgery counts as 1 HMO. There might be 7 units in there, but it counts as 1 HMO. So in terms of that figure, they said in the Welsh Government legislation, it doesn't mean individual flats within a HMO, it just says HMOs. Okay, so we've got 7 in the whole of Rumney. I can guarantee there are more than 700 houses in the whole of Rumney.
But we're talking about the high street, okay?
No. Look, we can't say that there are 7 in the whole of Rumney and then say we're only talking about the high street in terms of the impact. If we're talking about the high street, not all of those HMOs are on the high street either, are they? So we can't disseminate those figures from each other. They've got to be considered together.
Planning Guidance Wales.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I as Karen mentioned, I my previous authority I worked for was Swansea, and we did introduce a policy regarding concentration. I mean, it was 25% in some areas because of the existing concentration, 10% generally. But you're talking about within an area of about 50 metres, we draw an area around there and assess the number of HMOs within a 50-metre area. So, you know, that's the sort of area we're looking at. So if you're applying that to those sort of logic to the numbers you're talking about, it's minuscule really in terms of percentages. You know, the impact, even with, if there were 20 HMOs all along that high street and upper high street, it'd be nowhere near the concentrations that we're talking about whereby the authority would be in a position to argue a case that it was over concentration. Because you're looking at the impact upon community cohesion, the character of the area as a whole. You know, in Swansea we're talking about concerns about schools closing because you had a single sort of demographic, young people, students, didn't have children, the local school was closing. Those sort of impacts we're talking about. We're not talking about antisocial behaviour, that sort of stuff. It's not something we would take into account, as we mentioned on numerous occasions. So when we talk about over-concentration, we still have to demonstrate that there is an impact from in planning terms, in terms of social cohesion, in terms of those local the community centres closing, the pub around the corner, you've got a different demographic going there, that closes, so on, the corner shop closes because they're not. Those sorts of things that affect the community as a whole are the sort of impacts that you know, in planning terms, Swansea, Cardiff, Newport, where you've got high concentrations of students that are really changing the way that the character of an area, the community changes. Not, you know, you haven't got a mixed community, you've got a single demographic that causes different issues and problems. So those are the sort of issues we're talking about, you know, stemming from that concentration. Not just the fact that you've got you might have a lot of HMOs in one area. Because realistically, people are really only concerned about, well, they see the main concern is this perception about antisocial behaviour. It appears to be the core of this, and that's not a planning matter. And that's not a plan. And I'm trying to dovetail that into the planning system some way, because it's there's parking issues or this issue with this. It just doesn't, you know, we just can't give it any weight.
Yeah. If I come back in there, you talk about social cohesion, you know, I'm familiar with the area. I don't live in Rumney, but I am familiar with the area. It's a deprived area. There's a lot of trouble up there. There's a lot of problems up there. You know, the antisocial behaviour may not impact the planning decision, but it's something that we should consider. And I would like to put a motion through to say that until we get those numbers on how many are actually on that high street alone, not talking about all of Rumney, in that small contained area, until we got that information, I think this should be deferred. And I'm happy to propose that forward.
So how specific is Planning Policy Wales in defining an area? I mean, does it say that
No.
if it exceeds 10% in a high street, that you know it's not acceptable?
It's very vague, Chair. It just says 10% in an area, and I suspect that they want then authorities to specify what the area is, because it would depend on the impacts on as Ryan said, the cohesion of that area.
Yeah. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, Chair, typically they look at 50 metres sort of area around the property. Maybe you take a street, but most guidance talks about that sort of area in terms of a 50 metre.
And that's the problem with guidance, Calvin, you know, it's just guidance, you know. Again, I can't get away from this. It's at the high street in Rumney. If you take out the shops, you take out the empty properties, the numbers are coming down. How close are we to 10%? I'd like to put a motion forward to defer until we know exactly how many we've got and give me a percentage on that high street. So could I put that motion through, please?
Can I just come back?
Yeah. Sorry.
Can I just come back? But what I need to understand, you know, in terms of that motion is what planning impacts are you concerned about in terms of this concentration? What are the planning impacts?
We've had multiple conversations about the 10%. Okay, we don't know how many's in. I don't know offhand how many houses are in that high street from the bank to the top shop. We'll say. So how many houses are there? How many dwellings? How do we calculate that? Are we talking people, housing, properties? This is the bit that is all a bit wishy-washy. So I would like to see those numbers in the report and the reflection of how many we've got against how many are there. How they present a Carwyn, that would be down to the planning officer, but I would like to see those numbers in black and white. So at least then, in future, the planners or the planning officers and the councillors could say, it is this.
So you're proposing that...
Until there's more information on how many HMOs are in that high street compared to the amount of properties, it should be deferred.
And that's why you're asking for deferral. Is that seconded? Oh, sorry, did you want to come back in first, Carl?
Yeah, just wanted to, and it's expanding on Ryan's point really, even if we have a definitive figure on the number of HMOs on Rumney High Street, or Upper High Street, or Church Street, whatever you want to call it, or that a whole stretch from the former Pen and Wine down to the bank, even if we have that figure, do we have empirical evidence that there is an issue with HMOs in Rumney High Street? We've heard today about antisocial behaviour on Rumney High Street on a property which could become a HMO because the residents of Rumney don't want the HMO there. That is not evidence of the impact of that HMO. That's the impact of antisocial behaviour existing at this moment in time in the town centre. So even if we said to you, actually, we've worked out now, we've got 11% of the properties on that stretch which are HMOs. Therefore, it's above the point where, and you're right, it is guidance, but the guidance also says 10% is the point at which issues can occur. Doesn't mean that they will occur. So even if we get to that 11%, do we have evidence to say that the issues are occurring?
As Councillor Cuss said, we've got, 17% of the whole of Caerphilly in Rumney, or in the top of the valley. Was that the figure? Sorry, I can't remember exactly. And I just think that, you know, we've got to be mindful is if we don't stop at the 10%, how far do we go? How far are we going? Yeah. And if we don't know where we are towards the 10%, where is the measure?
It's lies, damn lies in statistics, isn't it? Where you've got 17% of the HMOs in the whole county borough are in Rumney, but it's 17% of 0.18% of all of the properties in the county borough are HMOs. So I'm not a mathematician. No. I have no intention of working out what that percentage is, but it's a low percentage.
Yeah. It might concern, Carwyn, I know you do a fab job, all the plan officers are amazing, yeah. My concern is this Rumney High Street, and I would like to push ahead with that motion.
So if you're moving that, is it seconded? It's been seconded, then in which case we can put this immediately to a vote?
Yes.
We can't?
Yeah.
So it's been moved and seconded then, so that proposal has been put forward. So those in favour of deferral, please say yes.
We just have a
wait, yeah, to get the voting slip, because this isn't the voting slip we expected to have. So we've got to get that one in place. So if you are voting yes, you are in favour of deferral. If you vote no, then we continue with the debate. Can I say, while we're waiting for this to come forward, we had a similar case of vandalism in a recent application in Blackwood. Nobody condones that sort of action. And the committee were really strong in that situation when that particular case came before us.
Okay, Joe, I'm ready now. So
Okay, the voting slip is there for deferral.
yeah. So members, as the chair has explained to you, you are now voting on whether or not you agree to defer the application that's before you. And the deferral is based on some empirical evidence that you've asked officers to obtain. So if you want to defer the application and it comes then before future committee, press yes. If you don't want that to happen, against. And if you want to abstain, you abstain. So if members could cast their votes, please. Anybody having any difficulties with voting, if you could let me know. Thank you. So, Chair, the item is going to be deferred. There were 7 for deferral, 6 against deferral, and 1 abstention.
Can I
Just if you'd like to come back in, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Chair. Just so we're crystal clear here in terms of the information you want, you're asking for information on HMOs, houses, not privately rented accommodation, single person. It's HMOs within the use class.
Sorry, Carl, it was in my notes and I skipped over that. Just
because it's different. It's a different.
I get that.
There's a lot of properties. I think, sorry, a lot of properties you might have mentioned there.
Yeah,
probably are not HMOs
no.
And
I think this is half the problem with our Rumney High Street. There are a number of properties. If you look at the Tabernacle Church, it's 1 bedrooms. You know, there's a lot of issues with, you know, the people being supported for mental health and that type of thing. So it's difficult to say it's just HMOs.
So that's
the
not
impact
a HMO,
on our high street is more than that. So how the planners approach it, I don't know if there's a further conversation to take place. I'm not too bothered about the flats. It's just really the areas where there's support mechanisms in place and the HMOs. The trouble is we're categorising just the HMOs on the high street. We've got the Tabernacle, which has got, I believe, 8 or 10 bedrooms. You know, that's creating similar problems, although that is well managed.
But that's not a HMO?
Well, it's not, and that's the problem.
So obviously every community has got a range, a mix of tenures and types of housing. That's part of the housing stock, and that's what part of accommodating our housing needs. And we can't, in planning terms, take into account, or there's a flat there with some single people living.
Yeah, no, I get that.
We've got to be clear really what we're looking at, and really we define these sort of things. HMOs is a separate use class.
I take that. Yeah, at least then, you know, in Rumney, because Rumney is there are issues in Rumney. At least then, you know, Councillor Cuss could go to Rumney and say, well, look, there's nothing we can do from a planning position because the high street in Rumney only it's 4%. You know, we got a clear answer. No, this we're unsure. It's the unsure bit within the report that we wanted I wanted clarity on.
Yeah. I mean, we know exactly how many we've granted planning.
No, the unlicensed ones, though.
Yeah. No, we know exactly how many we've granted planning permission for.
Yeah.
And we know all the licensed ones. So, I mean, what we don't know, I guess, is
and that's the issue.
That is the HMOs, issue. And I would ask perhaps that we have a chat with Councillor Cuss in terms of local knowledge, in terms of where they might be, I guess.
Yeah, we take that.
But it's very difficult for us to identify.
Oh yeah, I agree. I know.
Identify the use of a property when you talk in that with 2 people, it doesn't require planning permission. It's not a HMO, and then that extra person is a HMO. So it's a difficult one to nail down.
Yeah,
I guess.
That would be fine, Carl. We take that. And I thank Carl, you know, it's not having a go, it's just this report. Within that small area, we have major concerns up the north of the valley. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Then, in which case, that's decided as a course of action. It's going to be deferred until a future meeting. So now we're going to move on to agenda item 5. If you wish to leave the chamber now, if you've got no more interest in the next application, then you're welcome to do so. Thank you for your attendance tonight. And now then we'll move on to The next item, which is agenda item 5, which is application number 26/0165. Again, a change of use, and this one is 26 Maindy Road, Cumberland Newport. And the case officer for this one will be Mr. Carwyn Powell. Would you like to make the presentation on this, Mr. Powell? I'm sure it's going to be very similar.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, let me just share the presentation for a second. Okay, yeah, so this is an application for 26 Maindy Road, Cumberland.
Okay.
Let me get rid of that for a second. So that's the application properly outlined in red there. As you can see, it's an end of terrace property in Cumberland on the main road between Blackwood and Wattsville. So that's the existing floor plan of the property. As you can see, it's got a living room, dining room and kitchen at the ground floor with 2 bedrooms and a bathroom at first floor. The proposal is to change the use to a HMO. So it'll become a 3-bedroom HMO with the existing living room turned into a bedroom and the dining room turned into a living room. No external alterations to the building. And that is the building there in the centre of the photograph. So, yeah, deja vu. Effectively, we got a HMO here. In this instance, it's a 2-bed property into a 3-bed HMO. So in terms of car parking in this instance, theoretically, there would be a requirement for 1 additional car parking space, strangely enough. In this instance, there is a car parking space at the rear of the property. There is no scope to provide an extra car parking space. But I think you can just about see at the bottom of the photograph there, there's a bus stop directly outside the premises. So it's in a sustainable location with access to public transport facilities. So on that basis, there's no reason for objection from the Highways Department, and the garage at the rear is being retained for 1 parking space as well. Again, from a planning perspective, there are no changes in terms of the amenity on the neighbouring properties. This premises could be occupied by 3 adults as it stands at the moment. There would be no change in terms of amenity. There'd be no change in terms of bin collections and so on and so forth. So it's recommended for approval. I'm keeping the presentation short because I'm sure there'll be discussion on it, but I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Powell. Right, then if we can move on, we have 3 speakers again with this application. Before we move on, there's a number of hands up. I assume these still relate to the previous application. So if you could take them down now, and we'll only consider questions on the next application because that application is deferred, so it's ended. So we have 3 speakers again. I go back to this item number 5. The first speaker is Mr. Peter Sargent, who's unable to attend, and Councillor Reid is going to speak on their behalf. I have the copy of the statement. You can start whenever you wish, Councillor Reid. You have 5 minutes. Obviously, I've seen the statement. It's not going to take anywhere near that amount of time. So you start whenever you wish.
Can I just clarify if D2 Propco are here, if any of their agency here? Because Mr. Sargent has asked quite a few questions within his statement, and I wondered if they were here to sort of answer these questions.
Well, for the moment, Councillor Reid, you're only required to read out his statement. That's what you're allowed to do at this stage.
But can I ask that question, please? I can't ask that question. Right. Okay, thank you. Mr. Sargent's statement. Right, please find below a statement from Mr. Sargent, who lives at 25 Maindy Road, Cumberland. So that's next door to the potential HMO of 26 Maindy Road, Cumberland. He works shifts, so he's unable to attend. His first point is noise and antisocial behaviour has been reported on numerous occasions. And he's asking the question, do D2 Propco keep a record of these complaints? And if so, inform the committee of these figures. I think neighbours have contacted D2 Propco quite a bit, and they don't seem to be having answers.
Can you just stick specifically to the statement? Because if you wish to ask those questions yourself afterwards in your presentation, you can. but at the moment, stick strictly to the statement.
There is allegedly noise monitoring in the property, so why is noise nuisance not acted upon without complaints from neighbours? Have there not already been 3 residents living at the property in the past? As I believe, to the best of my knowledge, this has happened. There is already insufficient parking for residents in Maindy Road, so where are the service staff who come to the property each day, possibly house residents going to park? Has any kind of impact study been carried out? Are the residents monitored and visited, and how often? Will the residents be vetted, as there are children and vulnerable adults living very nearby? The village setting of this property does not appear to be an appropriate location for a HMO, especially as there are 2 other similar properties nearby. Many thanks and kind regards, Peter Sargent.
Okay, you can now start your presentation. You're allowed a full 5 minutes, Councillor Reid. Okay?
Okay,
Thank you.
Complaints and concerns from neighbours regarding 26 Maindy Road, Cwmbelynfach. 4 years ago, D2 Propco submitted a planning application for a HMO. Residents voiced their concerns. D2 Propco then withdrew their planning application, but still allowed tenants to use this property. One of the concerns is a possible grooming incident. This is quite serious. A tenant of 26 Maindy Road was giving money to a young girl, about 6 years old, who lived next door. Her single mother requested the tenant to stop several times. He didn't. Gwent Police and Social Services became involved. The man was moved on, but the single parent and her young daughter felt unsafe and left her rented property, despite her parents living next door and were a source of support to both of them. There's a vulnerable resident. A single 96-year-old woman lives 2 doors away from the potential HMO. Her elderly daughters are worried about the people at the property and are concerned for her safety, as they don't know the background of these tenants living at 26 Maindy Road. Antisocial behaviour, screaming during the night. A neighbour experienced persistent screaming, shouting, banging, crashing through the night from a tenant of 26 Maindy Road. So he lived in number 24. This behaviour disrupted the neighbour's sleep over a prolonged period of time, impacting his ability to function day to day, including missing alarms for work. The neighbour was also concerned about the well-being of the occupant. He kept informing D2 Propco staff, but nothing improved. The neighbour contacted Gwent Police, us as local councillors, CCBC housing officer. Then D2 Propco installed a noise monitor within the house and confirmed the tenant's behaviour. The man was eventually moved on. The situation had an impact on neighbours' well-being, stress levels and confidence in remaining at the property. He's now moved elsewhere, but brings into question D2 Propco's ability to manage the breadth of welfare needs of these tenants. Over 4 years, there have been 2 tenants living next door to the HMO, and both have left. There is now a young family with young children living next to this potential HMO. How long will they last? Antisocial behaviour. Neighbours report frequent groups of people attending the property, both during the day and night. Individuals regularly move between the property and the car park opposite, where neighbours believe drugs are being dealt and used. Loud music, horns beeping, nuisance behaviour and erratic driving. Neighbours are becoming fearful of the damage to their vehicles and do feel unsafe using their garden or leaving belongings outside. Are the external and internal CCTV footage and noise monitor checked on a regular basis to monitor tenants' behaviour? The lack of responsiveness from D2 Propco has reduced the confidence in neighbours reporting issues, which leads to meaningful action. High levels of rented accommodation nearby. Neighbours believe there are 2 further HMOs within the immediate vicinity of number 26 Maindy Road. I think they've got number 19, number 33, and obviously number 26. As well as the potential 3 HMOs, neighbours have noted 7 private rented accommodation in the immediate vicinity of the HMO, all in such a small geographical area, they're concerned about the deterioration of their neighbourhood. Parking for residents and staff who visit daily. Caerphilly Council have just refreshed a single yellow line between numbers 26 and numbers 36 Maindy Road, which has removed 10 parking spaces and compounded parking for residents. The adjacent car park opposite for 10 spaces is always full. Residents are querying where tenants, staff servicing the HMO will park with the diminished parking spaces available, as they are struggling to park their cars also. And we too are asking for planning to object or to defer this planning application until you sort of find out how many sort of HMOs are in, as Ryan have said,
Please wind up now,
50
Councillor.
metres
We've
of this
got
property.
15 seconds.
I finished. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Right, thank you. Okay, now we have the agent, Mr. James Driscoll. Are you there, Mr. Driscoll?
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Yes. You have 5 minutes, Mr. Driscoll, and I'll give you a warning as you near the end of that 5 minutes, okay? You can start whenever you wish.
Great, thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of D2 PropCo. So this property has been identified for use as temporary accommodation for single adults within the Caerphilly County Borough. D2 already operates in 13 councils across Wales, looking after over 600 people in over 150 temporary accommodation units.
Just a minute, Mr. Driscoll. Could you put your camera on, please?
I'm not able to. I'm on my phone, which won't let me do that.
Okay.
Does it need to be on?
Well, under normal circumstances, yes. But if you're unable to do that, I'll allow you to continue.
Okay, thank you. So we house over 600 people in over 150 temporary accommodation units. These range from small 2-bed terraced houses to 12-bed HMOs. D2 already successfully operates many temporary accommodation units in the Caerphilly County Borough. D2 manage all of our properties very diligently. Properties and tenants are visited daily by the dedicated and fully trained house managers to check on their welfare and the condition of the property. Any issues are reported to the housing team, and any maintenance issues are reported to our dedicated maintenance team for action. There will be CCTV cameras covering all the communal parts of the property. Each morning these cameras are checked and a full report is sent to the Caerphilly housing team. We work very closely with the council and report back the activities of the tenants to the council. D2 keeps the houses to a high standard with a full-time maintenance manager and regular collections of any excess rubbish. We also employ cleaning contractors to visit on a regular basis to assist tenants in keeping the property clean. D2 operates a strict house rule structure, which is explained to each tenant on moving in, and they are required to sign a copy of these rules. If occupants do not adhere to these house rules, the information is reported back to the council to act on. We have a very good working relationship with the team in Caerphilly and are in daily contact about all of the houses and all of the tenants. The Caerphilly housing team decides who is placed following discussion on client profile. Tenants that are placed are not on occupation contracts, but licences, and therefore if breaches of rules occur, then these issues are dealt with and placements can be ended, and tenants can then be moved on to other accommodation. If any issues or any antisocial behaviour was to occur, then these will be addressed directly by both the house manager and the housing team immediately. D2 operates a 24/7 on-call system for both tenants and neighbours, and this number will be made readily available. The house manager will also introduce themselves to the neighbours to promote an open and approachable relationship. The level of accommodation that D2 provides for temporary accommodation is done to a very high standard, with the ethos of giving people good accommodation to live in, then they will treat it well. D2 are committed to providing temporary housing solutions to vulnerable people, and we pride ourselves on providing accommodation for those without a safe place to stay. This type of accommodation is far more appropriate than bed and breakfast or hotels, and gives the tenant a better chance of maintaining their placement in the property and a greater chance of a successful move on to their own accommodation in the future. We also believe that this type of accommodation is a significant cost saving for the local authority compared to the alternative options. I hope this gives a brief understanding of our service and what type of company we are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Driscoll. Now we move on then to officers. Would you like to respond initially to the comments that have been made by the objectors and the agent?
I think perhaps we'll take questions from members.
You're happy to take questions?
Yeah,
I
I think
that
so.
most of the questions, most of the comments would be repetitive comments from the previous application. Yeah. So we have got a number of questions from, first of all, Councillor Dix, then Councillor Shane Williams, and then Councillor Greg Eade. Okay, Councillor Nigel Dix first.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try not to be give you too much of a feeling of deja vu with this one. I'll do my best. But I received an email a couple of weeks ago. I asked a question about how many HMOs were in the area, and I had the email back stating that I didn't know because there are unregistered HMOs. I think that's critical. If any policy of 10% can be enforced, you have to know how many there are to breach the 10% threshold. I'm amazed that we haven't got the tools to actually do that, and that's something we need to do. HMOs are always going to be controversial. I wouldn't want one next to me, and I don't think anybody on this committee would as well. I don't think the officers would, and I understand the fears around such, having HMOs next to people, because they can be problematic, and they are problematic in certain cases. You'll always get the reassurances that are going to be managed well and properly. But I've worked in many HMOs for 15 years, and that is sporadic to say the least about the management, because the main objective is to keep people housed in there and try and work with their behaviour. That is no comfort to people who live next door who have to put up with that behaviour 24/7. That's the reality of HMOs. I feel the whole policy is unfit. The way it's not the council's fault, it's the Welsh Assembly government who brought in a policy of HMOs without the proper checks and balances and without the proper consultation for the communities to feel safe when HMOs are put next to them. That was all lacking. It was just rushed through in COVID, and that's what you got. I would argue that with this HMO as well, we need to have a figure of how many HMOs are in that area currently. And I would like to suggest that we defer this until we get that figure. If the council are going to look at the number of HMOs that are licenses, we need to make sure that all towns are treated equally. And therefore, I suggest that we do the same with this application on Maindy Road. Thank you.
Okay.
On Newport Road, that is.
If you are moving that recommendation, I'll do the same as we previously did with the other application and ask to see if there is a seconder to that. There's no indication of a seconder. Therefore, we'll...
Chair, I think Councillor...
Yeah, I'd second that.
Okay, so it's been seconded, in which case then we'll put this one to the vote.
Before we do that, I think Ryan wants to speak.
You want to speak first?
Yeah, just going back on the same point. I mean, as I said earlier, we'll be able to identify HMOs that have been granted planning permission and HMOs that have got licenses. But it's really difficult to identify any other uses. We have to rely on local knowledge. Councillor has just indicated that it appears to be 2 further HMOs within the area. So even with those in the area, you're not going to be hitting the 10% threshold within any immediate sort of vicinity. So I think it's futile to bring this back, to defer this for further information. I guess I can understand some of the concerns about the previous application. Rumley High Street is perhaps a different scenario in terms of the mix of uses, etc. in that area. But realistically, and what are the material planning issues and concerns that members would have from there being 3 HMOs in this street? Again, in planning terms, we'd have no basis upon which to justify refusal based upon all the previous discussions we've had.
Yeah. But bear in mind that it has been proposed and seconded for deferral. So, Carwyn, you want to come back in?
Yeah, just to repeat something I said earlier on, Chair. We've heard today numerous accusations of antisocial behaviour with the application property as it stands at the moment. And I've spoken to officers in the housing department who confirmed that there are 2 tenants in the property. That doesn't consider change use to a HMO. So, but she has also said that she is not aware of any issues with that property for the last 2 years. So whether you accepted there have been antisocial behaviour issues or not with our premises, even if you accept that there have been antisocial behaviour issues with our property, even though it's not a HMO and doesn't require planning consent.
Yeah.
So what would be the actual difference in terms of the impact on the residents of one additional person moving into that premises and them becoming a formal HMO? In planning terms, what would be the difference between the two? If you could tell me what the difference is in terms of those two, then by all means we could defer it and we can have a look at how many HMOs there are in the NSD ward. Again, Ryan has already said it would be difficult, if not impossible, for us to identify all of them, because the accusation is there are 2 other HMOs. That is the view of residents, but the residents already think this property has been used as a HMO, even though in planning terms it hasn't been. So those suspected HMOs may not be HMOs. So it's the reason we haven't done this is because in terms of those we've granted planning consent for, there are very, very low numbers. We haven't granted planning consent for any HMOs in the NSD ward. That's the records we have on our files. Licensing don't have any records of any either. This property is being used by housing for 2 of their customers. That is not a HMO. And we're already having accusations of antisocial behaviour. There would be no difference if we had 1 additional person in there. You'd still have allegations of antisocial behaviour. So in planning terms, what would the difference be? And that's what we've got to consider. So it doesn't matter how many HMOs there are in the area. Are they having an impact on the amenity of residents and a change from what can happen as things stand at this moment in time? In terms of car parking, in terms of waste, in terms of antisocial behaviour, in terms of noise. Is there any difference between a family of 3 adults living together or 3 people living in a HMO together? If you can provide me with evidence to substantiate that I could go to an appeal and defend an appeal, by all means defer for refusal or defer for further information. If we can't do that, I cannot in all conscience advise members to refuse an application, because I wouldn't want to sit in a hearing or an inquiry to defend an appeal against that refusal. Thank you.
Okay. So we are at the stage again where we have to put this to the vote, first of all, as to whether we continue with this application or whether we defer it.
So members, there's been a request for a deferment of this application once again. There's a poll before you. If you want to defer, yes, go for. If you're against it, against. And if you wish to abstain, please abstain. Anyone having difficulties, please let me know. So, on this occasion, Chair, the deferment has been refused. So there were 3 for deferment, 10 against, and 1 abstention. Thank you. Okay,
so we now move on then to the questions that are coming from members, and we'll start with Councillor Shane Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think Carwyn touched on it earlier. I think every time this comes up, much of the criticisms of HMOs follow the same pattern, and it seems to focus on who may live at these properties. And I find it quite alarming when language is used like we're worried that people who live at this property because we don't know their background. Well, someone could privately rent a house, buy a house next door to anyone, and you might not know their background. And I think that inbuilt prejudice against people looking for homes is absolutely scandalous. And I keep hearing it in these meetings, and I think we should be well aware of what is being said about how these people are being viewed. We're drumming up prejudice and hatred against people who are looking to live normal lives. Can I just say, or just ask, I know that antisocial behaviour is mentioned, and I know it was mentioned in the statement. I just wondered if there are known cases, and I don't mean allegations or someone said something about someone passing something on to someone. I mean, if there's known history of antisocial behaviour resulting from HMOs that have been given planning permission. Does that, I know we treat every HMO on its own merit, any planning application on its own merit, but does that type of thing then have any material impact when we consider awarding a planning application?
Yeah, it can do, yeah. I mean, what you need to have is a body of evidence that substantiates that all HMOs are going to cause this problem. Now, it could well be that you've got one tenant in a HMO which causes problems with that HMO. That person has then moved on and that HMO operates perfectly well, depending on the tenants within it. That's not an inherent problem of HMOs. As you've already said, that person could have just rented a flat off somebody, or they could have purchased the house next door to you and be a rogue character. We can't control who buys a house, and we can't control who rents a house either. We can't control who is a tenant within a HMO. So we can consider it, but we would not need to have a body of evidence which says that every time there's been a HMO, in every instance, there's always been lots of antisocial behaviour with all of those HMOs. Well, members will recall that we've sat here now, and there seems to be an HMO application on every agenda that we come to. We've got 2 this today now. And we have the same allegations every time. However, I cannot tell you that we have got any enforcement complaints about the operation of any of those HMOs, because we haven't. You know, we have the allegations beforehand, but we never get any complaints afterwards about the operation of those HMOs. Now, that's because they will complain to the housing department and so on and so forth. But we've also discussed with them, and they're not receiving complaints either. Now, if residents do have concerns about an ongoing HMO and the operation of it, they should raise that with housing. The housing would then inform us. And if it becomes a proliferation of those issues, and it becomes that, yes, we do now know that these HMOs are causing problems everywhere, and not just the fear of them causing problems, then we then can consider that moving forward. But at this moment in time, the body of evidence we have doesn't establish that, so we can't really consider that on that basis.
Yeah, I think just to add to that as well, that we had a report at the beginning of the meeting from the Environmental Health, and the reports suggested that there were very, very low numbers of complaints. So, you know, we can't exaggerate these things without evidence, and the evidence is pointing in the other direction in real terms. You wanted to carry on, Williams?
Just on that point, and in reference then to Mr. Sargent's statement where he says there's been reported on numerous complaints have been reported to the PropCo, the D2 PropCo several times. Taking up on what you said then, Carwyn, if they get a number of complaints, they are duty bound then to inform our housing officers of what is happening going on. Again, that's not a planning matter, which we know this every time. This is not a planning matter, so we're exploring something that's slightly different. But I just want to give Mr. Sargent's point of fair hearing, if I might, that if they have made the number of complaints, then our housing team would be well aware of that. Is that right?
That's my understanding, but I'm not the right officer to answer that question, I'm afraid. I can get an answer to that question for you from the relevant officer, because I spoke to her previously today. But as I said, over the last 2 years, they've not received any complaints in respect to this premises. So clearly, whether residents are going to D2 PropCo and whether they are passing those messages on to housing, I don't know. I'm led to believe as well the local members have raised issues with her, but not in the last 2 years, is my understanding. So that's all I can answer on, really.
Thank you very much for that.
Fetch Kerry Davison as well. She's indicated that she wished to add some further information.
Thank you. I just wanted to add some confirmation that we assist, as Environmental Health, we assist council housing if they do need investigation of any sort of noise complaints. They will come to our teams for help and support with those investigations. So I just wanted to give reassurance that they would come through to Environmental Health. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for that, Kate.
Okay, you finished it? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Eade, you're there? Councillor Eade, yes, I can see you there now.
Yes.
Your camera wasn't on earlier.
I had it off because I was eating and I didn't want to subject anyone else
Okay.
to that vision. Thanks, Chair. Here we are again, Groundhog Day, another 2 HMOs. I'm sure I share the frustration of members of the public, fellow members, and probably even planning officers that once again we're having long, convoluted discussions about HMOs. I think on one hand, our hands are tied. We're told constantly by officers that there's very little flexibility in these, which makes me question why they're coming to planning committee in the first place, because it would appear to be a rubber stamp, which officers are capable of doing in many other applications. But I've also been reading the Welsh Government guidance on HMOs, and it's not very definitive at all from what I can see. For starters, I can't see any reference to a 10% threshold of HMO concentrations in any area, however you define that area. Again, that's not defined. There's other weaknesses around things like that there isn't a proper decision-making framework. There isn't any clear principles and guidance about what reasons we can refuse and what reasons we can grant HMOs. So it seems that a lot of it is left to the local planning authority to decide, and yet we don't have a policy on it. Officers have mentioned that other local authorities do. I think we really do need a policy so we can have some black and white guidance to enable us as a committee to make informed decisions. But we're operating in a vacuum. And today, what we've seen is inconsistency in decision making. We've deferred the first application for a future decision. This second application, we're now debating and we might well pass it. To me, that's inconsistent. There's 2 HMOs. They should receive the same treatment. In all conscience, given what I've heard tonight from complainants and things, I cannot bring myself to support this HMO because I think the guidance isn't strong enough. And I think there isn't enough proof that this will not, have a detrimental impact on members of the public that have to live in this street. So thanks very much. It's a general comment, but also some specific points I've raised with regard to the national guidance and how it's interpreted. I appreciate if officers could come back on that. Thanks very much.
Where you said there were other authorities that had policies, I think that was explained where there has been a proliferation of HMOs in, for example, university towns. So effectively, their policy has to be used in areas like that because of the situations that can develop from it.
Sorry, Chair. I agree, but that's no reason for us not to have our own policy because, as you can see, as tonight, we're struggling. We haven't got any guidance to help us make a decision. So I do think we need a local policy.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Eade. Yeah, obviously, there's no question, just a comment. Now we move on to Mr. Powell. Did you want to come back in?
Chair.
I'm sorry, you moved to the top of the list here as well.
Sorry, Councillor does ask a question. He asks about the 10% thing. So, the 10% comes from a document called Houses in Multiple Occupation Review and Evidence Gathering. So that's the document which was used by Welsh Government guidance to create the 2017 guidance on HMOs, basically. So the guidance that Councillor Eade has just read doesn't include the 10%, but the evidence gathering does. And that's where they say that 10% is a point at which issues can occur. So
is it official guidance though, Carwyn, that document, or is it just?
No, it's not. So in terms of whether it's 10% or whether it's less than or more than 10%, it's not guidance at all. And as you've already referred to and has been referred to by Councillor Powell as well, it is guidance. So it can go either way. But if you use it as guidance, you've got to establish that there is still an impact as part of this development, as I referred to earlier on. And the impact here, is it any different to what's there at the moment? So I've already made a point on that. I won't go over that one. And the other one then is in terms of a policy. I know that Ryan was nodding as Councillor Sorrellis commented on that. At this moment in time, given the evidence we have, if we put a policy in our LDP about HMOs, it would be this council supports the provision of HMOs in the county borough. Because there is a shortage of that type of accommodation. There's a need for that type of accommodation. And there is no evidence that it causes unacceptable impacts. So we would have to put a policy in which says we would support the provision of HMOs in the county borough. And I'm being slightly facetious with that because we're never going to put a policy of that nature in unless evidence proves that we have to put it in. But we certainly wouldn't at this moment in time be able to justify a policy which says we're having no HMOs. We just couldn't do that. We haven't got the evidence to do that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Powell. Now we can move on then to Councillor Bissex-Foster.
Oh, good. Okay. Where have you gone? Can you still hear me?
Yes, and see you.
Oh, good. Right. Just to say, regarding the evidence of issues with HMOs, there seems to be a lot of hearsay, but nobody appears to be collecting or informing the councillors themselves about if there are any problems. I mean, it just seems funny that people are saying they've complained, and yet there isn't any complaints, right? Also, months and months ago now, we started meeting. We met with Hevin David, who got us a meeting with someone from the Senedd to discuss this, and then obviously Hevin passed away. Now we met quite recently with Jane Bryant over this, and there is an issue about percentages, the 10%, because what we were saying is, whilst 10% might be acceptable for a city or Swansea, it's not necessarily, appropriate for a valley town. And she did recommend that maybe the leader, and Jamie was in the meeting, come up with a policy. So it was interesting that you should say, if you had a policy, you'd say we support them, because they had this discussion about each authority having their own percentage as to what is acceptable. And whilst we're clearly aware now that we need this type of business, but where's the protection for the people who live in the area? I mean, you talked a couple of times today now about parking. Okay, this house had no parking, so it's going to be changed into a HMO and it still has no parking, as if that's the end of the story. They built bike sheds out the back, right? So that's assuming that everyone who lives there is going to have a bike. That's not the case, is it? So the reality is, whether there's spaces there allocated or not, if 4 people go and live in that house with a car each, where the effect that it's having, cumulative effect on other people, and we get all the problems for it. So whilst I understand your standards are very strict, right? As councillors, we are representing all the residents, not just the ones who often come from out of the area to buy a house, to set up an HMO so they can make money. I mean, what we will probably do, and I will instigate this, is get another meeting with Jane Bryant now, because when we had the last one, we were just coming to the end of that particular, Senedd.
Can I just stop you because you're not asking a question for clarification. I agree with what you're saying, but obviously this is a discussion that should be held within our political groups. And matter taken from there. I mean, this is not a matter that we can discuss here tonight, and it's not a matter that the planning committee necessarily can take up. It's an action that we should be taking up outside this committee with our political groups and effectively with Welsh Government. So can I just ask you?
Can I ask?
Yes.
Can I just ask, and I put it in the chat, that, we formally ask for any complaints from HMO to be given to their local councillor, because to say that there's been no complaints for the past 2 years, when someone's coming to us with evidence saying there's been lots of complaints. So, unless we start collecting it formally, we're not going to have that evidence, are we?
No, but again, there is no evidence, as far as we're concerned at the moment, that could anyway persuade us that the proliferation as it exists at the moment of HMOs is causing that sort of problem. So that's the situation as it stands. So, outside this chamber, in our own groups, we can pursue the matter that you highlighted, Councillor Bissex-Foster, okay?
Okay.
Can I move on then to Councillor Adams and then Councillor Mansell-Powell? Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chair. 4 members who were in the planning committee 6 years ago. I first got involved with D2 Dropco at that time because they were putting in an application within Pond and Firth for a very similar property, if not exactly the same as you looked at the plans, and got involved then with talking to the neighbours who were concerned about it, very concerned of the kind of people who might be coming there on occasion to live next to them. And yes, there were a couple of issues because the D2 Dropco had to come back and forth, as well as looking at their video cameras. They came and spoke to the people who they had placed there that we had proposed to them needed that kind of housing. And that kept on for about a year until different people were then moved in and out. And D2 Dropco were very, very much always on the buzzer when councillors were told about it, and then we contacted them. And we've had over the years D2 Dropco coming back with other applications, and we've listened to everything and we've said yes. In other areas, other constituencies or wards, have we had many complaints about their new properties that they were expanding? And they've got quite a lot around South East Wales. I don't think we've had many come back to us saying that that was the wrong decision because all the trouble that some people were anticipating hadn't occurred.
So you're asking Councillor Adams if there are any evidence of bad management effectively by D2?
That's
whatever
right.
the name of the company
That's
is. I'm sorry.
That's the question.
Okay.
Where they've been putting our people referred to them into these properties.
I don't think we could answer that.
I doubt it.
We can only answer in terms of this application property because we've sought that information today, effectively. And as I say, we've got no enforcement complaints in terms of any HMOs in the county borough, so I can answer that question. In terms of complaints to housing, then I can only answer in terms of this application property and nothing in the last 2 years. And there are no other HMOs registered in or with planning consent in the NSD ward. So, I can only answer specifically to this ward effectively. So, no is the answer to the question in short.
Okay.
Effectively, we've had local members, Chair, who weren't concerned, convinced that it was the right thing for their order or their ward. They haven't come back to us talking about follow-up questions of, did we make the right decision? So it's been quite peaceful, it would seem.
Okay, thank you for the comment then, Councillor Adams. Councillor Mansell-Powell, I hope it's not as long a
No, it's a bit quick one. It's just to touch upon. It's just to touch upon what Councillor Bissix Foster and Councillor Adams said. It's nice this D2 popped up before. When we can't stop these HMOs or not, but we would like a bit more control on them. I worry about privateers jumping in, which we think that's what we experience in some areas. But with D2, they do seem a good company. And if we can have an HMO in Rumney and in Ponlottin and D2, although we would be reluctant to accept it, it's nice to see it managed properly. The question I had, Catherine, was on the licensing. Now, you mentioned licensing within the report where they said some over 3 stories had to be licensed, some didn't, some are not. What's the situation with licensing at the moment? Obviously, D2 would be licensed, but what would be the position with the earlier applicant if it was a one-off privateer? Would they have to be licensed for that application from the, or has it been a change in legislation? Or
my understanding is that properties over 3 stories have to be licensed as a HMO, irrespective of who the applicant is or whoever the operator is. It's the size of the property that is the trigger. I understand that it's three stories.
Yeah.
I don't really get involved in that because clearly it requires planning consent with us, whether it's 3 to 6 as a C4 HMO or more than 6 as a sui generis HMO. So that's where we step in. And whether it's licensed or not is not a material planning consideration. No. It clearly is. It's an indication of how many properties we've got in the county borough that are HMOs, but it's not really an issue for us. So but my understanding is that it's over 3 stories, and that's where it needs licensing.
Yeah, because it raises the problem we questioned on the Rumney one, where we don't know how many HMOs we got other than those are coming through planning now. What I'd like to see in reports in the future would obviously, the numbers within that area, specifically within that area, maybe, some kind of dialogue on how close they are together. Complaints have been mentioned. Is there any way to access complaints? I think what we're looking for within the report is reassurance to the public that, the HMOs are going there. They're not creating an issue, but they want to see that evidence in the report.
Again, we're talking about planning matters here.
Yeah,
I don't think we can venture into those areas.
It does relate to 10% for me, that.
I mean, in terms of what we've been asked to do in terms of Rumney, it was a fairly specific thing. It was High Street, Upper High Street and Church Street, isn't it, basically? That's a defined area, and I can say, okay, I can send an officer out to go and say, how many do you want on that particular area? But if for example, we don't have that advice from members or that indication from members, I could have said to the case officer, Josh, here in terms of Rumney, this is on Upper High Street. Tell me how many properties on Upper High Street are HMOs. I could have given you all that information, which would have been the accurate figure for Upper High Street, and you would have come back and said, no, I want to know all of Rumney. And it's like, well, without an indication from members to start with, and because that guidance says area, doesn't define what the area is, it's difficult for me then to say to officers, I want a figure for all the HMOs in High Street. I want all of the properties from High Street up to the Pen and Wine, and I want all of them in Rumney, just in case we get asked all 3 questions. It's a hell of a lot of work to do on particularly as we hear every month on a HMO application, quite frankly, 2 this month. It's a hell of a lot of work for officers to do on a matter which, as the chair has referred to, as I've referred to and Ryan's referred to, isn't really an issue in planning terms anyway. We don't see that these properties are changing the character of the area or even changing the character of the actual application property. So to do all that work to justify something which we don't think is actually a change in the character seems very onerous, really, to be honest with you. Which is why we do a desktop exercise, is the truth of the matter. So, if we've got evidence of what's got planning consent, what's licensed, we can give you that information. But to provide the information you want for Rumney, it means Josh having to go out on site and go in a survey of the whole town centre effectively.
Okay, thanks. I was only a question on the licensing. That's all. I thought I might just change in legislation from the 3 stories to moving on. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Dix, can you restrict yourself to questions this time, please?
Yeah, I was just thinking if the question is obviously the 3-story criteria for registered HMOs excludes, I would argue, 99% of possible HMOs or HMOs you currently have within the county borough, because I can't see many of them being 3-story. They're going to be, as we've been discussing, terraced houses, maybe some detached single, just ordinary houses. So I just think that the question should be, you're not going to capture most of them anyway. I think officers just put their thoughts out on that. And that I sort of indicates that we do need a proper policy to be put in place. Thank you.
Still didn't get a question then, Councillor Dix. Well done.
Chair, the question was, does the officer believe that with a 3-story criteria for HMOs, that they are capturing all the HMOs that are actually within Caerphilly County Borough Council, be it Ernestine Ward, Blackwood Ward, Pontley Fife Ward, dare I say your ward, or anybody else's ward? Thank you.
Okay. Right, there's no further indication. So with this application, the recommendation is that permission be granted subject to the conditions contained in the officer's report. Will somebody move that, please? Is it moved? You moved it, Councillor Adams. Has it been seconded? It has been. Thank you, Councillor Angel. So it's been moved and seconded. So can we have a voting slip then? Please indicate whether you're for the recommendation, against the recommendation, or whether you wish to abstain. I think we've had plenty of discussion and clarification, so I hope there's not many abstentions after all that information has been given to us. Okay?
Okay. Thanks, Chair. The planning permission has been granted. There were 11 for, 2 against, and 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you. I don't know whether you wish to leave now before we get on to the next application. This is agenda item 8, and it's application number 24/0416, and it's Reserve Matters of Virginia Park Golf Course, Virginia Park, Caerphilly, and the case officer is Anthony Pine. Anthony?
Thank you, Chair. Do you want me to pause whilst people are leaving the chamber?
I'm sorry. Oh, okay.
I'll just share the presentation so that. There we go. Okay. This application, as mentioned, is a Reserve Matters application. It relates to part of the former Virginia Park golf course. You can see the site boundary outlined in black there. Just for some context, the outline permission that this Reserve Matters is submitted under established the principle of the redevelopment of the wider golf course site, which encompassed additional land to the north, for up to 350 homes, and also approved access at outline stage. So I'd like to clarify to members that access is not being considered at this stage, even though there's reference to it in the development description, which I'll come to later. An earlier Reserve Matters application, that was 21/0477/RM, related to the northern parcel of the site outside of the boundary for this Reserve Matters application. And that was previously approved and consented 174 homes. As mentioned, this current application is for the southern part of the site, although it does exclude an area indicated for a local centre. And this application includes 163 homes, which would make, together with the previous Reserve Matters, a total of 337 homes proposed at this stage on the wider site. That's an aerial photograph of the site. The development includes 12 homes as affordable housing, which accords with the previously agreed level of affordable housing under the outline permission of 7.14%, which, as I said, was agreed under the outline permission, which itself was subject to a review by the district valuer, and the 7.14% was the figure that was reported as required given the abnormal costs of developing the site. So the previous Reserve Matter is in grey partially, that you can see there. The main access is from Hillbrow Wen, continues through the phase 1, and this phase 2 would interlink with that. As you can see, there is a large attenuation pond on the eastern boundary, and there is a planning condition, Chair, if members are minded to approve the application, which relates to that attenuation pond and a nearby locally equipped area for play that I'm just indicating with my cursor, hopefully, at the moment. That would require finalised details for that area, just to enable flexibility in terms of safeguarding and planting and or providing additional landscaping to the eastern boundary where there are existing properties. Moving further south, this slightly overlaps. The bottom of the housing finishes there, and then just for information, there is an area of public open space, including at the bottom in the southern corner, tarmac court and playing pitch identified, which accords with the outline permission. There are also, I believe, 3 local areas for play, which are there. I'm just highlighting them there, so they're spread through the development. The affordable housing is separate. Affordable housing is on the first phase, and the affordable housing is around here. In terms of the development mix, the open market housing includes 2, 3 and 4 bed properties, and the affordable housing, as I mentioned, the 12 units include 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, 2 2-bed bungalows, and 3 and 4 bed dwellings. Indicating the affordable housing, it is on a couple of private drives, and obviously with affordable housing in the first phase, it's considered it's adequately pepper potted through the development as a whole. These are some examples of the house types. That's a 4-bed dwelling. There's a 3-bed dwelling, the M1 there. This is one of the affordable apartment units, I believe. The bungalows and another of the affordable apartments with a sort of walk-up flat on ground, and then access to the first floor apartment. And some garages as well that would be contained on some plots. In terms of the layout, this has been reviewed and it's considered to be acceptable, providing the 163 dwellings with mainly 2-storey properties, along with these bungalows with the appropriate design and finish. The landscaping is considered appropriate with finalised details to be agreed under the outline conditions. In respect of scale, I've touched upon the fact that it comes within the 350 dwelling limit, and the height and size of dwellings is according with the scale parameters and is deemed acceptable. The application was advertised via a site notice, press notice and neighbour notification letters. I'll just also show you some photographs of the site. These are taken from the southern end. Remediation across the site has sort of been undertaken to a certain degree. So this is the former golf club building you can just see on the left-hand side, which I believe is now a youth club, and potentially the local centre would go around that as well, but that would be subject to a separate reserve matters application. And this is a shot from Beech Grove, looking towards the sort of northern part of the site. As I was about to say, the application was advertised via site notice, press notice and neighbour notification letters. In terms of consultee responses, Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water have raised objection to the application. This is due to the presence of a sewer crossing the site. The developer, however, is aware of the matter of the sewer and has indicated they will be seeking diversion of the sewer under separate legislation. So it's considered appropriate to advise them formally via informative note of the comments of Welsh Water, and that would be a matter for them to address. Comments received from the placemaking officer have been reviewed, and as I indicated before, the submitted layout is considered to be acceptable and broadly consistent with the earlier approved phase to the north. 5 objections have been received in relation to the application, and these have been summarised and commented on in the committee report. It's considered that this reserve matters application accords with the outline permission and is acceptable in planning terms. It is requested, Chair, if members are minded to approve the application tonight, that delegated authority is granted to officers, firstly to amend the development description to omit reference to access as a reserve matters, as that was considered under the outline permission. And also that authority is granted to members just to amend the plans condition currently, the developer had submitted two house types referred to as S1, I believe, which could cause confusion in the future. They are different square footage, but it's deemed sort of appropriate to rename one of the houses just to avoid confusion. So, authority would be sought to amend the plan's condition to reflect that change if members are minded to grant approval, subject to the conditions in the officer report, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pine. We have a speaker who is the agent, Mr. Joe Ayubakani. Are you there, Mr. Ayubakani?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
You are. You know the rules. You're a frequent visitor here. So you've got 5 minutes to make your presentation.
Great, thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I'm Joe Ayubakani. I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant Foxhill Homes. At the outset, I'd like to thank the 5 people who took the time to submit comments on the application. We recognise the importance of local views, and I want to reassure members that all matters raised have been fully considered through the application process and are addressed in Mr. Pine's officer's report. My own involvement in this project now spans almost 10 years, so I know firsthand how long-standing the development site is. The principle of residential development is already established through the Outline Planning Permission. Phase 1 has already been approved and is now underway, and this application now brings forward the next important phase for this development site. It's therefore very encouraging and personally very pleasing to see real progress now being made at Virginia Park. The proposals have been designed to align with the outline master plan, to sit alongside phase 1 and to form part of a coherent wider development. It will deliver a mix of apartments, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom homes, including family housing, starter homes and homes suitable for downsizers. That range of accommodation is important because it means the development can meet different needs within the local housing market rather than catering just for one group alone. The layout also includes public open space and play facilities with pedestrian and cycle connections that will help integrate the new development with the surrounding area, providing benefit to new and existing residents. The development will provide much needed new homes in a sustainable location close to the town centre, shops and employment opportunities and public transport. The application is therefore fully consistent with National Planning Policy and ULDP. It's fully consistent with the Outline Planning Permission. There are no sustained objections from statutory or technical consultees that haven't been addressed. And finally, it forms an important part of delivering a neighbourhood where people can live and thrive. For those reasons, respectfully ask members to support the officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ayubakani. We have already one interest from Councillor Greg Eade. You wish to ask a question, Councillor Eade?
I've actually got 3 questions. I don't want to drag it on at length. I know we're nearly at 7 o'clock now, but would that be okay, Chair?
Yeah,
I can ask each one in.
Yes, as long as we haven't got a long introduction.
Okay, I'll skip my long introduction then. I think my main concern and my first question with regards drainage, we're told in the report that drainage matters were broadly accepted at the outline stage, and the officer has confirmed that tonight. But the further detail we've dealt through separate processes such as SAB approval on page 42. However, at the same time, we're also being asked to approve a layout that includes an attenuation pond and surface water infrastructure, where the details are still not fully confirmed in this report and are subject to a future condition requiring revised details. That's condition 14 on page 47. So given that, I'd like to ask the officer, firstly, how can we be confident approving the layout today when a key element of the drainage strategy, the attenuation area, is not yet finalised? And secondly, how does the proposed design address the reality of what residents have reported frequently on this site of water, quite substantial water pooling that has been reported, as I say, locally by residents, given the history of landfill on this site?
Did you have a third question, you say, or just 2?
No, sorry, that's just the first bit. I got 2
right.
more.
Okay. That's in 2 parts.
To deal with them.
Right, Mr. Pine.
Yes, thank you for your questions. In respect of obviously we've mentioned about the separate SAB approval, the technical approval for sustainable drainage, which is a sort of a separate legislative requirement for the developer to undertake. In terms of, and indeed water, and discharge of water is all looked at under that process. Specifically in terms of the reason why there's a condition in terms of the attenuation pond, that is primarily a concern from officers to ensure that the boundary to the eastern side of the site is suitably planted and or existing planting retained. So that is a safeguard that from the planning side of things we've looked at trying to mitigate the impact on those off-site residents there in terms of the finalised kind of boundary treatment. And it was to give some flexibility to the location of that feature to ensure that we're happy with the landscaping. So it's more on the landscaping side from our side of things than the SABS side of things that the developer would be required to undertake separately.
So, Chair, if I could come in on the other point then, in terms of issues raised by residents surrounding the site in terms of water. I've been dealing with this site almost as long as Joe Carney has, so I've been dealing with it for almost 10 years as well. So I'm aware of lots of things going on the site there. This site was beset with perched water. Perched water is water which is trapped within the earth, effectively. So when the site was remediated, all of that perched water was then released and had to be stored on site because of the previous refuse site use of the site. It's not clean water, so it can't be discharged into a stream. It's got to be treated. So there was perched water, and it just so happened that there were torrential downpours in the winters. They were remediating the site as well. And Kerry will confirm that there were massive attenuation ponds on there holding this water. There were failures with those, which were resolved by the developer. The developer's contractor. And those issues have largely been resolved, and we've not had any issues for the last 2 or 3 winters. In terms of the water that's within the attenuation ponds and the perched water that was there as well, I'm led to believe by our SAB, I'm not led to believe, I am advised by our SAB authority that they've received an ordinary watercourse consent, and NRW have received a consent to discharge that water to the foul drainage and to treat some of the water, to discharge some of it to the watercourse as well. That is separate from the planning legislation, but that is a way of dealing with the water that's currently stored on site. It would be for those bodies to decide whether that water can be discharged to the sewer or can be discharged to the watercourse, and they would have to be satisfied by the developer that the water is clean enough to go into either of those receptors. But that is outside of the planning regime, but that should give comfort to members and residents that the water on site is being dealt with. If it cannot be discharged to either of those receptors, it would have to be tankered off-site to an acceptable facility to receive that water. So those matters are in hand outside of the planning process, but I wanted to give that information so members are aware of that and residents are aware of it moving forward.
Okay. Councillor Eade, you want to come back in now with your second question?
Yeah, thanks for those clarifying points by the officers. So secondly, I want to focus on trees and landscaping. So the report notes that the site previously contained trees, woodland, and other natural features, but I'm reliably informed that that has now been decimated to facilitate the development. This has been an issue dealt with by the local members and reported by the residents. That was in contravention of conditions that were put in the outline planning. So at the same time, we're relying on future details of landscape and tree protection, including in relation to the attenuation area, condition 14, which we just discussed. So my question is, what assurance can we give residents that tree loss, which has already occurred, will be mitigated in future rather than simply deferred to future conditions?
Okay, would you like to give your third question as well, so that officers can deal with that at the same time?
Third one is in relation to infrastructure constraints and delivery risk. So we have a recorded objection from De Cymru regarding the existing sewer crossing the site as detailed on page 38. While we're told this can be addressed, it does highlight that there are live technical constraints embedded in the layout that we're being asked to approve tonight. So again, my final question is it appropriate to approve the detailed layout before key infrastructure constraints, such as the sewer diversion, are fully resolved?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Eade. Officers, can you respond to those two questions, please?
So trees and landscaping, I actually had a meeting with the developers and the local members on site yesterday to discuss that very issue. In my wisdom, when I granted outline consent for this, I put a condition on saying that the 15-metre buffer on the northern boundary had to be retained for ecological and landscaping reasons. Unfortunately, the developers have gone and removed a significant portion of that to put the SAB connection in to the stream to the north of the site. We have served a breach of condition notice on them in that regard, and at this moment in time, they have failed to comply with that requirements of that notice. Sorry?
Okay, different site.
Yeah, that refers to a site by a different developer, though. So that is a site that has been developed by a different developer on phase 1 of the site. It is not part of this applicant's ownership anymore, and they're not developing that part of the site. So we met with the developers yesterday. We made it clear to them that they need to mitigate the loss of those trees in the short term. And the reason for that is because the tree belt is an important corridor for ecology and for bats as a flight corridor. So our ecologists have suggested methods of resolving that issue, which could be acceptable to us. It is for the developers' ecologists to come up with a scheme now for us to consider that. And in terms then of long term, they will have to put planting in, which will mature to replicate the ecological and landscape features that were there previously. When we say that they failed to comply with the notice, we served the notice in full knowledge that it was unlikely they would be able to comply with it, because we served it at the end of March for them to plant the trees within the next planting season, which ended at the end of April. So we gave them 4 weeks to effectively comply with it, which was effectively almost impossible to do, as they hadn't had a landscape architect to design the scheme for them. But we did that purposely because we want them to know the severity of the issue and to know that we are not prepared to accept this moving forward. So I hope members take reassurance from that we have acted on that in a way that makes it clear to the developers, both of the northern part of the site and this part of the site, that we feel strongly about the loss of trees and the importance of those trees as part of the development. And moving forward, we will take the appropriate action to ensure that all of those trees are replanted and the planting that's proposed as part of the development is included as part of a development. In terms of the other point, in terms of the De Cymru objection, I would advise members it is appropriate for us to approve this application. In terms of the issue raised by Councillor Eade as well, in terms of the attenuation pond, again, I'm advised by the SAB authority that they are 99% of the way towards approval of the SAB details. Now, in terms of a planning layout, if the layout shows enough space where they can accommodate the attenuation pond and all of the surface water drainage, that is all they need to do from a planning perspective, because we don't deal with those details. So, for example, if it says there's an attenuation pond here, which is has got a surface area of 1 hectare, but we don't know the exact depth of that because it might need to be 750 mil or 800 mil to accommodate the amount of water that's needed. That isn't necessarily an issue for us because the depth doesn't really change the layout of the development. So as far as we're concerned, the layout can accommodate the attenuation pond and all of the other surface water drainage that's required on the site. So it's acceptable to approve an application which doesn't have full SAB approval. In terms of the Welsh Water Sewer, yes, it crosses the site, and Welsh Water have objected to safeguard their interests effectively. But there is a procedure there under other legislation for that to be diverted. If Welsh Water refuse diversion of that sewer, then the developer would have to come back to us with a further reserve matters application, which has account for that sewer that's on the site. Hopefully, Welsh Water allow the diversion, which is technically possible to do, and this layout will be acceptable. If not, then the developers have to come back to us again, and members will have further opportunity to comment on that matter.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Powell. It looks as though there's only one more question. So are you going to wind up the night? I think, Councillor Fussell, can you ask your question?
Do my best, apart from wrecking the joint. Thank you for the report. And I think it was covered off with the local centre and community building that there seems to be further development on what was the former golf club. If that could be just confirmed. The youth centre provision is obviously there, and as there's going to be a football field added, it'd be a question of how that's likely to be serviced with changing rooms, and if that was supposed to be incorporated within that community building. That's one little question. We don't have a Japanese knotweed officer anymore, so future eradication of knotweed, should that be a persistent problem, because it is a known problem in waste sites that bound, well, historically, I think that Japanese knotweed is in the report. And on the attenuation pond, who's going to be the ownership of that? My experience of a attenuation pond on this site where I live meant that the company put themselves into ownership. The land became bona vacantia, which is basically owned by no one, Crown land, and therefore maintenance of it goes up to Swanee, and no interest from either County Borough, NRW or Welsh Water is helpful on those matters. So future ownership or responsibility of the attenuation pond is the big question that I'd like to know, and just confirmation of that community building, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fussell. Mr. Pine or Mr. Powell?
I'd like to be able to answer your first question, Councillor, but I'm 52 now. My memory doesn't serve me very well. As I said, I've been dealing with this site for 9 years now, and outline consent was granted in 2018. I have discussed with Parks about the provision of the playing field and the changing rooms, but for the life of me, I cannot remember what the answer to that question is. I believe it's included in Section 106, but I would have to come back to Councillor Fussell into that matter. But the local centre would form part of a further reserve matters application, which would secure those details. So
okay.
I think, I can come back with an answer to Councillor Fussell separate from this, but then the details will be in the reserve matters.
If it's going to form part of the next phase question specific to that, then I'm quite happy to wait for that report, whether it comes to us or it's delegated, just so long as it's being dealt with, really. That's the main thing.
Yeah. And in terms of the attenuation pond, I'm fully aware of the attenuation pond on the site you're referring to, Councillor, and yes, it has become an issue for the authority and local members and wider politicians. In terms of SAB features, they become adopted by the council as the SAB authority, and a maintenance sum is paid by the developer for the long-term maintenance of those SAB features. So I would suggest that those features would be adopted by the council and then maintained by them in perpetuity.
Okay, so that's obviously a departure from when this site was built. SAB wasn't around at that time. So because it's part of the SAB, you're saying to me that County Borough would have that overall responsibility ad infinitum? Yes, yeah. I mean, as you say, I mean, Castle Heights is where you live on, is it? It didn't have SAB. Castleview, yeah.
Castleview, yeah. There was no SAB then, effectively. No. I think things were in black and white then, Councillor, to be honest with you, but there certainly wasn't SAB, and it was probably an oversight on behalf of somebody not ensuring that it was maintained or controlled in some way. But SAB approval now does include adoption of that with a committed sum for future maintenance, in the same way as playgrounds were and those sort of things as well. Lovely.
That's a far better outcome for future attenuation ponds. There we are. Thank you, Chair. I'll
Okay,
move
thank
the
you.
report as per officer's recommendation, together with the condition on finalised details of planting and landscaping that Mr. Pine mentioned. But I appreciate Chrissy wants to speak as well.
Did you say you're happy to move it, Councillor?
Yes, I did, and that condition as well.
Yes, with the conditions that
just to clarify, Chair, sorry if I may, what was requested was amendment of the development description to omit access, and then the amendment to the plans condition to reflect the house type name change. The condition referred to by Councillor Fussell is already on the report.
Okay, so subject to those conditions, officer's recommendation is for approval. Is somebody going to move that? Did you say you were moving it, Councillor Fussell? No?
I'm moving it.
Yeah, you moved it. Okay.
You have
Is it
Christine wants to speak as well.
You're indicating, Councillor Bissix Foster, are you indicating that you're seconding it?
No, I wanted to speak, please.
Oh, I see, because your hand had disappeared from my screen.
Yeah, I know. I just noticed it gone.
Okay.
Can I just have a little bit of clarification on the sewage? I tell you what, I'm dealing with an issue at the minute with residents where a golf club has done something about draining their golf pitch, and it's affecting the residents and causing flooding. So can you just clarify, did you say that Welsh Water had objected to some of the sewerage on the site? Could you just clarify that for me, please?
No, Welsh Water hadn't objected to the provision of the sewerage on the site. It was that there's a sewer crossing the site. So that's in terms of the assets. But I think if you're referring to a golf course, I suspect that's more surface water, which wouldn't be a Welsh Water issue anyway. That would be a matter for our SAB authority.
Yeah, I am dealing with this issue with Capilli Council staff at the minute. I was just wondering if there wasn't going to be a similar issue if something was done, with that. So what if there's a sewage on it, how will they cope with that when they're doing the building? That's what I wondered would happen.
The existing sewer that's on the site, if consent is granted by Welsh Water for the diversion, would be diverted before any houses are built on there.
But this is what I'm trying to get at. Will it affect nearby residents then? Because this is what happened in the case that I'm dealing with at the minute, that they changed the draining system in the golf course and it affected local residents.
That would be a technical matter for Welsh Water to resolve. It's outside of the planning remit.
Okay.
Okay. Right, okay, that seems to be the end of questions for tonight. It's just a matter of us now continuing with the recommendation, which has been moved and seconded, subject to the change in conditions that has been highlighted. So can we've had somebody move it, that's Councillor Fussell. Is it seconded? It's been seconded, okay, then can we have the voting slip, please?
Yeah, the voting slip will be before you any moment, members. Could you please cast your vote on the application that you've heard about in great detail?
Okay, thank you. For, against, or abstain.
And that application, Chair, has been unanimously approved.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tranter. And that concludes tonight's meeting. Thank you for your attendance tonight. I wish you all a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.